You feel like you don't matter, feel like your life doesn't matter, get involved.
You talked about and you provided some recommendations related to Te Tiriti or Waitangi framework.
Yes.
And I suspect that the Crown would probably say that they have 7AA of the legislation. And we talked about this last week a lot, and I noticed you haven't mentioned that or critiqued it even from an academic perspective. In 7AA, in their reporting, I note that Ngāti Kahungunu Iwi Incorporated have a memorandum of understanding with them, and from Oranga Tamariki's own snapshot, have stated they will commit to continuous open discussions and positive negotiation and a problem-solving approach to all matters related to fulfilling the purpose of the partnership. Do you get involved in that as part of your iwi, based on all your experiences where I'm coming from?
That's a very, very interesting concept. It's my understanding that iwi authorities are government. It was the way in which government found it easier to negotiate with Māori, and so iwi authorities were formed. What we need to understand is that marginalised Māori that who sit on the fringes do not connect with either government agencies or iwi agencies. They are they are marginalised from their cultural and annihilated from that world. And for many Māori who do not see the iwi as their saviour, find other ways in which to find support. And I'm talking about the 23 gangs in New Zealand, and I can't name them all because I may. I do not give them justice, but we know from the proliferation of gang involvement in this country that their support is in finding ways of being with each other and by supporting each other. So when we talk about the iwi being in partnership with the Crown to support Māori, we're only talking about a fraction of the number of Māori people who are engaged in either the iwi or government. So the ones targeted by Oranga Tamariki sit outside that arena, completely outside that.
So I fully appreciate that. At a macro level, it's not necessarily filtering down. I was more interested in whether you, as a professional who's been in there in a long time, is being drawn from an iwi perspective to be able to support them more broadly based on your experience.
I think, the question is such a great question. It offers us such boundless opportunities for the Crown to work with Māori. So how do they do that? Well, I know that, the Māori midwives birth most of the gang babies. I've been around 30 years, so I'm now birthing grandmas and they used to call me Auntie Jean, they now call me Nanny Jean. And so I've seen that those children, you know what, given support, it doesn't matter what you wear, what gang regalia you wear, you're a parent first. And given the right support, we as Māori can care for our babies, whether that be iwi, I don't know, but we definitely can do it for ourselves, given the right support to do that.
So I also note, particularly in the 7AA material that Oranga Tamariki have, is they have the kairaranga role. I'm not sure whether you know who that person might be for this rohe.
No.
That is great.
I hope they come and have a talk to me.
I do too.
I haven't, there's been no one knocking on my door and saying, hey, we're going to do this and do that. It's interesting.
Yeah. The other thing that I also note in their report is they have 3 huia whānau facilitators. for Ngāti Kahungunu. Whether in your mahi you work with them closely, or if you know who they are.
No, I don't know who they are. I don't have any idea. But you know, if we looked at traditional Māori birthing and caring for babies and the way we did it, we had whānau who were connected through whakapapa to land and identity with our deities. So we hene te iwa and our birthing models and our mythological knowings and beings, and through our whakapapa, our connectedness with our land, that allowed so we challenge the idea that Western thinking is the mother is the caregiver, because in our world it's the whānau, it's the mother is not the caregiver. We have whāngai, so mothers were supported and babies were part of the bigger picture. What we have missing in this country is a connect between the Māori midwives who birth those babies and those whānau. It's no use intercepting that and giving them a caregiver or someone to support, because, you know, I've seen the same families intergenerationally for the last 4 generations, and caregivers and support people come and go. For every funding round and every different contract and program government comes up with, they're going to come and go, but the midwives are always there. And traditionally, whānau had a birthing midwife, and they were the same midwife in those whānau, and we taught each other. So midwifery was handed down, and caregiving and birthing was handed down from one generation to the next generation. My sister's a midwife, my daughter's a midwife, my great-grandmother was a midwife, and it is something inherent that you can teach each other and care for each other. That whole paradigm is missing when we talk about healthcare in this country. That whole need. The need for support workers who are not whānau is something strange to me. It should be part of our whānau who are there, whānau given the support to care for whānau. Sorry to go on.
No, that's why. Just seeking some clarification on your paragraph 58 and maybe 61. Are you talking about a review of the midwifery or all the services?
I believe that there needs to be a complete independent review of any service that comes in contact with pregnant Māori women and their babies. It's long overdue. There hasn't been one. The last review was carried out in 1986. And I have a copy of that review that identifies huge gaps in care for Māori women. And we've got the Heather Simpson review that recommends mātauranga Māori, kaupapa Māori be embedded in maternity. So what does that mean? You know, what in real sense of the word, how can that be achieved? And I think that rightly so, that should be led by Māori. It cannot be led by government officials who tick box forms, which I've seen in the past. We're currently going through a maternity review at the Hawke's Bay DHB, which is very interesting. And much of the review is about the behaviour of the DHB rather than looking at service needs of Māori. And so we risk, when we open up inquiries and reviews, that many of these reviews look inwardly instead of looking at what could be achieved for Māori. They look at their own organisation and say, well, what can we improve upon? And really, they get nothing comes of it. And so while we continue to seek changes, some of that comes with certainly the reviews that don't make change at all.
Just purely out of interest, with that review, is there Māori representation on the review panel?
At the Hawke's Bay DHB, we've insisted on having Māori midwives on that one, and so we've had 3 meetings. Be interesting. That report, for example, that attached report that came out for the referral guidelines for pregnant hapu mama, that I put in as an attachment. I asked that report go in the review and been told no, because that's part of a different department. So when you've got departmental silos, you're not going to get change. So while the maternity midwifery programs might get reviewed, the referral programs and pathways to multidisciplinary teams are outside of the review. So that referral form to the 278 maternity providers is not going to be part of the review.
And just finally, so I talk from a macro iwi level and try to whittle it down to the micro. And as you kick-started this whole thing off for us, and in watching the documentary, more specifically with Maori Oranga Tamariki workers there, from your perspective, how do you deal with the tension between, Māori, in terms of cultural practice? Clearly you have a particular view, clearly they had a particular Oranga Tamariki view. How, from a whānau perspective, this must be even more confronting because you have our own people pitted against each other, all claiming to have the best interests of the tamaiti or the mokopuna at heart. Could you proffer a comment on that?
I think the TV interview or the TV episode showed the end result of long engagement with Oranga Tamariki. The mother and I had been to their office and we had discussed with them a care plan months and months before we got to the hospital. And so for me, it was clearly the ability of Oranga Tamariki workers and staff not to engage appropriately with the whānau when they could have. So the opportunity was there months before the baby was born. I think significantly there is a challenge for Māori who work in government departments to try and enforce those rules and regulations as part of their work. There is a conflict that what they're doing doesn't always meet the needs of Māori. And I know that there are many times when government departments employ Māori to soften the way so that they can get ultimately their policies and practices embedded. For an example, Grania Mouse came under lots of criticism as the CEO of Oranga Tamariki, and what she's done has surrounded herself with male men, Māori men. And we see that often in government organisations when they come under criticism, such as the DHB, and their first response is to set up a elitist Māori men's group who breach tikanga by telling you you don't know what the tikanga is. And often or not, you find yourself, the red herring being your ability to speak on behalf of your mama and whether or not you're breaching tikanga, when in fact what they're doing is considering considerably more harm in the background. And I think New Zealand needs to wake up. I think we need to stop pandering to this idealism that by simply setting up a Māori group of advisors on any government department, we will finally get some results for our Māori people. It won't happen. It won't happen. And particularly when most of those people on those groups are men. It is the Māori women that go into battle. We will fiercely defend our children and our tamariki. We will rip them apart, whether we are right or wrong. And for us to be continually made to feel inferior. When Captain Cook came here in 1769 on the 6th of October, we as Māori had lived since the 1300s in this country in partnership with our men. Māori women stood alongside Māori men in partnership. When they came, they put us to the bottom of the heap. I could go on about this because I've got a whole chapter on colonisation and the dehumanising of Māori women. And it is well known that our women's rights were taken away. And so, you know, there is no last battlefield in this country than in this courtroom fighting for our children. This is the last battlefield, this here, for every Māori woman in this country to birth safely, to know that she can go home with her baby, know that no state government, anybody can walk in that room and take her baby off her at the birth. That's all we're asking. That's all this whole thing is about. You cannot keep stealing our babies. They cannot keep taking them on the guise of child welfare. You cannot, you can't. I believe we will take up arms if we continue to be treated in this manner, because we have every right to believe that we can have our babies safely, that we can keep them safe and people won't come and steal them.